What's going on, YouTube? I just wanted to hop on here real quick and share some thoughts. Shout out to the nameless protagonist for the work he's been doing around emotions and mental health. If you haven't seen those videos, I think they're definitely worth checking out and really spending some time taking to heart, what he's saying in those videos. After checking out his last video, I spent a lot of time thinking about what the next phase of mental health for Black people in general and Black men in particular could look like. I think it's pretty clear. We're going to have to innovate, period. There's not really a modality out there that I'm aware of that really deals with the complexities of our situation the way we really need them to. And that's not to say that, that there's no value in seeking out the stuff that already exists, because I think we absolutely need to take full advantage of any resources that we have available to us to get our mental health, where we need it to be. But I think that there's definitely a lot of room for innovation and improvement, and definitely a lot of opportunities for us to build some things that work for us. Listening to Nameless's breakdown of the suicide rates among our demographic, put it plain, it evoked a wide range of emotions for me. As somebody who deals with these things professionally, and as somebody who's been personally affected by suicide, I find the lack of attention and resources directed toward this issue unacceptable and deplorable. It highlights what we already know. Nobody's coming to save us. I say that all the time, and I'm gonna keep saying it, because it's true. That video touched a grief that permeates my being at times because of all the loss that I've experienced and that I've witnessed. It stroked a place where deep resentment used to live, a resentment that I had to deal with in order to not destroy myself and the world around me. Resentment is insidious in that way. It can sneak up on you and rot you from the inside if you're not vigilant and careful. Some of us understand that and know that better than others. Resentment it's expensive, and I think we need to process our pain so that resentment doesn't do us in, to be blunt. So it's going to be on us to move the needle on these issues, as unjust as that might be. If change is going to happen, it will be because we refuse to relent. The idea that the Black manosphere is a space of healing won't come as a surprise to anyone who spent any significant time exploring these Black YouTube streets. It's one of the only, if not the only place many Black men have where they can consistently go to honestly express their sentiments about their lived experiences and reasonably expect to receive some level of understanding and empathy. It's a space where, Black men actually have a voice. It's a space where we can share our ideas and information about just our lived experience without getting blatant disregard and gaslighting. I think it's cathartic to me and to many just to hear dialogue that goes on between Black men. Even if it's something that I vehemently disagree with, it's nice to hear brothers helping one another work their ideas out in good faith for the most part. And while it might not always be pretty or even palatable to some, it's a space that holds immeasurable value. And dare I say, in the near future, we may even see the Black manosphere credited for the inspiration of systematic changes within our society and around the world. And wouldn't that be something? Shout out to Dr. Tiasan Johnson for his 14-point Black male political agenda. Seeing that come together has been inspiring, to say the least. I think it speaks to the potential of this space and the value of the space. And with all the talk about mental health that's going on recently, it's been on my spirit to begin to build something similar for mental health. But it's we need so many things. Where do you even start? And so here recently, I stumbled across a video that I think gave me a piece of the puzzle that I've been lacking. And what that is really a framework that ties the many fragmented pieces of our experience together to create something cohesive. And that missing piece is Afro-Surrealism. Now, I don't ever recall ever hearing that term before a few days ago, which is shocking because I've been apparently heavily influenced by Afro-Surrealism for a long time and even been engaged in it without knowing that there was a term for it. For me, Afro-Surrealism in its various forms has produced some of the most accurate expressions of the absolute absurdity of Black life. I think it attempts to name that which is also often nameless. It highlights the bizarre experiences we have in ways that geniusly humanize them and therefore humanize us. And in this way, I think Afro-Surrealism has a lot to offer Black people, and Black men in particular, in the field of mental health. This idea that we haven't really reached a point where we're fully recognized as human may seem as a shock to some and maybe not to others. But I think that that's where we are, is we're still in a position where we are coming to grips with the fullness of our humanity as a people. And I think we're definitely still in a position where our humanity is not really recognized by, the world at large as Black people. And so Afro-Surrealism is something that I will further explore here in the Black manosphere to see if theory can hold its own. Because let's be clear, as Dr. Ronald Neal so passionately stated after that Shabri Rawls incident, where she was basically, chastising Black men for what she perceived to be some kind of deficit in being able to articulate and understand their emotions. But as Dr. Ronald Neal said, there is no culture of empathy for Black men. This doesn't exist. I mean, I think we're building it from the ground up, in different small spaces, the Black manosphere being one of them. For many of us, this is the only place where we can come to be heard, understood, and receive some modicum of empathy. I think it's the reason why many of us stick around. This community offers refuge from the constant stress of moving through the world as a Black man. And as odd as it might sound, I think that might be the reason why for a long time I actually refused to identify as a therapist. So I'm a licensed therapist. I've been in the behavioral mental health space for I think it's 17 years at this point. I kind of stopped counting. But something about that title of therapist bothered me. In my mind, it conjured up images of old white men sitting smoking pipes while their patients lay on the couch and they're examining them like a lab rat or something. That's literally what would come up when I think about that term. And so, it felt cold, it felt distant. It didn't feel anything like what I hoped to offer in my clinical practice, anything that I would want my clients to feel. So I decided a long time ago that I would never be that kind of quote unquote therapist. But maybe that's another conversation for another day. So how do we leverage Afro-Surrealism in this space towards mental health? And how does the manosphere give birth to what might be the first clinical theory that centers the Black experience? Before I answer that, I want to show you a video about the show Atlanta. And I want to kind of use what's presented in this video and the show itself as a case study. So as you watch this video that I'm about to share, I want you to consider that the experiences of the characters being discussed aren't really all that different from the ridiculous reality we're expected to accept as true on a daily basis. And I want you to consider how the sheer absurdity is never acknowledged, let alone addressed, because to do so would upset other people's moment. And I want you to just ask yourself, what kind of burden does that place on the psyche of the individual that's having a surreal experience? So if you will bear with me for just a second, I'm going to share my screen and cue in this video, and then I'll check back in after this video runs its course and share some of my ideas about it. And we'll go from there. Bear with me. I've got a ad plan. Just trying to get in the way of our progress here. I don't want me to be great. I guess I should have been more prepared. Alright. Got that. Here we go.
This is my father.
In 1988, Amiri Baraka writes about Black author Henry Dumas. Dumas's power lay in his skill at creating an entirely different world organically connected to this one. The stories are fables. A mythological presence pervades. They are morality tales, magical, resonating dream emotions and images.
Resistance is a symptom of the way things are.
Shifting, ambiguous terror, mystery, implied revelation. But they are also stories of real life, now or whenever. Constructed in weirdness and poetry. To Dumas's work, Baraka applied the term Afro-Surreal Expressionism.
Hello? Something off.
Donald Glover's Atlanta is about a place, a world where something feels unreal. The characters see it, they know it, and you can feel it too.
This place feels weird to you, right?
Things are weird. Something is off. Something isn't right.
This place sucks.
What is it?
Is this real?
No. No, it is not.
This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Get access to my videos and
I love a
podcasts
commercial.
early and ad-free on Nebula when you sign up for CuriosityStream today. When show creator Donald Glover said in a now deleted tweet that the only thing that could compete with seasons 3 and 4 of Atlanta would be The Sopranos, I would have laughed it off as hubris if the comparison between the two shows wasn't already so appropriate. Atlanta is technically excellent. The filmmaking is precise, visually interesting, and evocative. The camera work is always intentional and meaningful. Shots never feel out of place. It's well paced and edited. And it does all of this while being a show that takes big risks in its approach to storytelling. The Sopranos established a set of characters and had a loose plot that ran from season to season, but it was always more interested in exploring interesting corners of its time and place and the characters who inhabited that space. It slowly constructs a sense of the atmosphere, not just of New Jersey, but of a particular culture and experience there. But it defied stereotypes about the mob to present the everyday life of its characters. Like The Sopranos, Atlanta has a loose plot, but it's much more interested in sketching the texture of its world. Each episode becomes a unique individual stroke that together creates a portrait. The episode set within a local public broadcast, or the episode examining a mysterious character, or the one about a New Year's Eve party at Drake's mansion, and many others aren't about furthering the plot. They are about doing what the show is best at, which is filling in the essence of a location, time, place, and experience. But the portrait, the experience that is defined by these strokes, is not sketched in the style of realism, but something else.
It's Justin Bieber.
There are the obvious things. In this world, Justin Bieber is black. There are invisible cars. Strange men offer you bites of a sandwich on the bus.
Bite this sandwich.
Talking about these elements, people frequently throw out the word surreal. Besides The Sopranos, another genre-breaking revolutionary show that Atlanta is descending from is Twin Peaks, a show that also explored a location where things felt off and which used surrealism extensively to do so. At one point, Glover described Atlanta as Twin Peaks with rappers, and when in the first episode the man shows up and offers Ern a sandwich, it puts off a distinctly Twin Peaks kind of vibe. But surrealism doesn't tell the whole story of what Atlanta is doing. Unlike Twin Peaks, these strange occurrences don't fascinate or garner the obsession of the characters who encounter them. They simply punctuate a deeper, more pervasive sense of strangeness, that something is wrong.
There's an alligator in there? Yeah.
What Amiri Baraka wrote about Henry Dumas's work as Afro-Surreal Expressionism could easily be applied to the show Atlanta today.
I'm going to write a manifesto. I'm going to put it in a local newspaper and see if it has international impact over the years. And it did.
That's D. Scott Miller, who in 2009, with the permission of Baraka, dropped expressionism from the term and wrote a manifesto titled Call It Afro-Surreal. Miller's manifesto would identify and catalyze a movement that has spread and grown significantly since then. What Baraka and then Miller identified primarily in literature was spreading into visual art and then film and TV.
I suspect that Donald Glover has been aware of Afro-Surrealism for quite some time now. In fact, when I saw this American video, I pointed to it. That's Afro-Surreal. Then I saw Kendrick Lamar's All Right video, where he's got a cop carrying a car. That's Afro-Surreal too.
Miller's manifesto speaks of unknown worlds emerging. That Afro-Surreal presupposes that beyond this visible world, there is an invisible world striving to manifest. The manifesto says Afro-Surrealism sees that all others who create from their actual lived experience are surrealists.
So how do you distinguish between surrealism and Afro-Surrealism? How are they different, right? Well, the way the surrealists to do their thing was automatic writing, seances, shrugs. In order to get above reality, these people used to have to use technique. And what I'm saying is if you're dealing with an absurd fiction every day of your life, something that you know is not real, that you have to treat as if it's real, you're already in a real situation without having to do anything. But we have to treat them like they're real because they're less things putting us in jail. That's the denying us our employment. That's the thing that's getting people killed, right? Is this connected?
The Sopranos and Twin Peaks utilize traditional surrealism, but they do so to explore dreams, psychology, and metaphysical reality. They're using surrealism to get at a reality that exists beyond this reality. But Afro-Surrealism doubles back on this and presents a reality again. It's a reality that is itself inherently surreal for marginalized people.
All you have to do is just exist, and you're in an absurd, real situation.
I should be able to use $100 bill. Okay, what happened to us was racist.
It was weird.
No, it was racism. Textbook.
There's realism and surrealism. But adding another prefix, Afro, black above reality. That's what it means. So it changes the meaning of surrealism as much as surrealism changed the meaning of realism.
Miller emphasized to me that his intent was for this manifesto to be an inclusive document, that Afro-Surrealism was for anyone marginalized on the basis of class, race, gender, or sexuality.
It's not segregationist, it's integrationist. I wanted to include everyone. So if you actually look at the beginning of it, it opens with an indigenous Mexican woman, Frida Kahlo.
He quotes the Prince song.
And when did you know that you were a 35-year-old white man? Well, I've always felt different. I go to the store, the movies, and just be thinking to myself, like, why am I not getting the respect I deserve?
And Atlanta explores identity from many of these angles.
Mr. Paperboy,
Mr. Yeah.
what would you consider yourself?
A rapper?
A straight rapper?
Hell yeah.
Well, I did some research on your lyrics, and they're actually very pro-sexual spectrum.
Oh, for what?
Vern is constantly feeling out of place.
I'm not Alonzo.
The show's characters, there's discomfort in how they're being defined by others based on race
I didn't choose black.
or class.
So, do you work with Earn or you an artist? No, I'm sort of in between things right now. I stay at home mostly.
The now infamous episode Teddy Perkins has many interpretations. The one that seems most resonant with the broader themes of the show to me is the one that sees Teddy and Benny as two parts of the same. With Benny as an aspect of Teddy's identity he's ashamed of and struggling against.
I want to point to the fact that most Black Americans are not fully African. Like, what you're doing is you are creating an identity in order to pacify the white identity that says this is what you are, even though you know for a fact that's not the entirety of you.
You've never been to Africa?
No.
You gotta go. It's your motherland. What are you thinking?
Whiteness created these things. Black people were like this. Asian people were like this. Latino people were like this. And we all had to adhere to these fictions that were created for us.
I'm just trying to stay real.
This navigation of identity is tied to the show's exploration of reality and what feels real.
Are black women considered brunettes?
If you're inspired to advance your career, we invite you to learn online at Purdue University Global.
Man, I got to get the ad free.
We did it. We did it.
I got to get the ad free YouTube if I'm going to be doing stuff like this.
Everything you were looking for in
Y'all bear with me.
apartments.com.
There we go.
I just held the balls and put them in the jug.
In this episode, Darius explains simulation theory, while Van discovers that Drake isn't really at Drake's New Year's Eve party, that all the photos that were being posted on Instagram were with cardboard cutouts. Drake is a star whose stardom is reinforced by a projected artifice.
Stars are just a projection. It's actually already inside of your mind.
Dre,
What is real? Why does everything feel so strange? Donald Glover and his team intentionally creating an Afro-Surrealist work with Atlanta. Miller pointed out that Olim Smith, the artist commissioned to create the poster for the show's third season, explicitly identifies as an Afro-Surrealist. And that late fashion designer, Virgil Abloh, who has collaborated with Glover, also was familiar with the movement. It seems likely that he's at the very least familiar with the idea, but whether or not it's a conscious intent for the show is hard to say. As Stephanie Robinson, one of the lead writers on Atlanta, told The Guardian, we certainly don't approach episodes and say, hey guys, let's make sure this script is real. We're a very specific group of individuals who are probably more drawn to the unusual, the strange, and the otherworldly. It's just personal taste, not a verbalized mandate. Whereas Brian Tyree Henry, who plays Alfred, said in another interview, we honestly didn't think Atlanta was going to be seen as a comedy. You have to be able to laugh at the absurd to keep from crying. Atlanta's Afro-Surrealism forces me to challenge my assumptions about the world. It causes me to examine if what I take for granted as normal is creating an absurd reality for others. In a privileged position when trying to understand the experience of all kinds of marginalized people, I think it's typical to try to fit those experiences into a simple narrative that alleviates the burden on you, where you're not a part of the problem anymore or somehow never were. But in many ways, those oversimplified narratives end up being a denial of the ongoing reality of marginalization. So the attempts of the privileged to move past those issues can just end up feeding into the absurdity of the situation for the marginalized. But Atlanta doesn't let you do that. It forces you to confront this absurdity with its layers and layers of complexity. It forces you to consider the absurdity of our own world. It's not a show that's here to provide an easy answer. It's one that asks meaningful questions. It's a show that says, you think you see what's going on? Look again. Special thank you to D. Scott Miller for taking the time to...
All right. And so I know that's a lot to unpack. You know, there's a lot in that, a lot of ideas presented there. But hopefully it kind of gives you a starting point to consider how, this Afro-Surrealism expression could be used as a tool to really start to help us to really start to carve out a space, where we can wrestle with the absurdities of the other things, while at the same time maintaining an intact identity amongst all the other identities that we have to construct in order to survive. Because I think that that's often the case for many of us, is we have these various sort of aspects of our identity that are crafted to satisfy the demands of our environment. But those things get treated as more, somehow more more authentic, I guess, than who we actually are. It's like people think that the mask that we may have to wear as a means of survival is actually who and what we are, when that couldn't be further from the case. So this idea that, unlike surrealists of the past who needed to use techniques and substances to access some altered state of consciousness, the Afro-Surrealist lives there by virtue of their very existence is key. That's big right there. As Black men in particular, we're constantly confronted with a world that isn't real, quote unquote, that we are forced to treat as such, because failure to do so could cost us dearly, up to our very lives. We listen as other demographics explore hypothetical future dystopian realities, while the statistics bear out the sobering reality that we are currently living much worse right now. And nobody says a word. It isn't even studied. Talk about surreal. Our brother James Baldwin told us what was up, way back in the 60s, when he said, to be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a state of rage almost all of the time, and in one's work. And part of the rage is this: it isn't only what is happening to you, but it's what's happening all around you, and all of the time in the face of the most extraordinary and criminal indifference of most white people in this country in their ignorance. And that's big. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about, is, to be aware of this stuff and not having it be acknowledged, or not really having any kind of like framework to even talk about it. I mean, it's really wild to think about. And I guess it's for the longest time, without knowing what Afro-Surrealism was, I've been engaged in its practices. I have several tattoos, and I look at like one of the tattoos that I have is basically like this really big, nasty Grim Reaper, and it's got a quote from The Tempest, but there's a slight. I tweaked the quote just a little bit to pay homage to a Jay-Z lyric, and also a theme throughout one of Kendrick Lamar's albums, to Pimp a Butterfly. And so, and then I've got another tattoo that is it comes from the cover of the movie They Live, the sci-fi flick from, I think, back in the 80s. But I tweaked it a little bit so that instead of the main character being the face that you see, it's actually the Black guy from the movie. I've got a Basquiat painting that I had done. It's a canvas that I had done, and it's a picture of Basquiat's face, but I juxtaposed it with one of my favorite Rumi poems, The Guest House. And so I've been mixing and matching and playing with different ideas to try to give some kind of language or expression to my experience for a long time, which fits right in with that Afro-Surrealism sort of mode of expression, but I didn't know what it was. That was just me trying to figure out how to continue to make sense of my lived experience. So what, in my mind, what could Afro-Surrealist therapy look like? Well, I'm gonna read you a description and some different elements that I've come up with. It says Afro-Surrealist therapy is a multidisciplinary integrative approach to psychotherapy that focuses on challenges and conflicts that are often extremely bizarre in nature people face as a result of identity conflicts within hierarchical structures and how those stressors can negatively affect their mental health. So taking all those weird, instances and really putting those at the focal point, and instead of those being sort of this byproduct of other things, really putting that into the historical and like data driven reality, like putting them within that kind of a context and looking at like, how does having to constantly deal with these things affect a person's mental health? And so we're really trying to center two things. One, those experiences that we have as Black people, but also health itself. One of the things that I've noticed about the mental health field is at large, it's been mired in pathology and illness for so long that it really has a hard time centering healthy. It's, you listen to people talk about mental health, and pretty quickly what they're actually talking about is mental illness. It's almost like in this culture, we've been focusing on illness and sickness for so long, we can't even really imagine a culture that's really just healthy. And that's for the public at large, let alone Black folks. So the Afro-Surrealist therapist recognizes the historical context of mental health in relation to Black people in America, especially American descendants of slavery. Black men are of special interest due to their unique position as subordinate outgroup males, which leaves them vulnerable to disproportionate acts of injustice in the form of both overt acts of violence and benign neglect. Consistent with the intersectional feminist theory, Afro-Surrealist therapy holds that the overall health of society is threatened when the needs of the most oppressed and marginalized individuals are not addressed. I think there's some truth in that. However, conversely, owing largely to the work of Dr. Tommy Curry, Afro-Surrealist therapy finds compelling evidence that it is, in fact, Black boys and men who occupy the most disadvantaged position in American society. And so I think that's key, and maybe I'm guessing that I'm probably going to catch some flack from folks by, bringing, some feminist elements into this as I'm thinking about it and forming it. But I do think that there's some value in that, and I'd be open to hearing other perspectives and, getting some feedback about what people, in the space think. Black manosphere creators such as Dr. T.S. Johnson, Dr. Ronald Neal, BGS Ibmore, the nameless protagonist, Mumia Obsidian Ali, and the ideas of countless others, I think would be have produced content and dialogue amongst Black men that could be incredibly helpful in exploring some of this. One thing, an idea that I had that I think is key is this idea of surreal conflicts. And I'm calling those conflicts, surreal conflicts, are conflicts that arise as a result of the perception of imbalances of intentions, basic core needs, or desires, which are often unexpected and bizarre in nature. And so what that means is, I think like we're moving through the world a lot of times and we're just trying to do basic life stuff. We're just trying to go buy a water hose from the store, get through grocery shopping, like just normal mundane stuff that has to do with just basic intentions, being a person who has agency in the world and trying to express that agency, which is, basic humanity stuff, right? Or trying to do something that satisfies some core basic need or some desire that we have. And we have these bizarre experiences that are almost so like mundane and ridiculous that like you can't even hardly wrap your mind around what's even going on. I call those surreal conflicts, and there's a lot that I could say about that and just the importance of uh, us as Black men having the awareness of what our intentions are, what our basic core needs are, what our values are, what our desires are, so that when we have these surreal conflicts, we've got language and awareness that allows us to address those conflicts in ways that restore balance and don't put us in a situation where we could be minimized or gaslit or painted to be some kind of brute or you know, angry, violent figure just for trying to do basic life stuff and having emotions that arise when that's thwarted. Some key techniques that I think could be beneficial to a Afro-Surrealist framework include basic some conflict resolution, problem solving, genograms or family maps that map out dysfunctional roles that we might be accustomed to or have adopted, and also power dynamics. I think we need to be able to assess our core human needs, values, strengths. We need to be able to deal with our locus of control. You know, I think many of us have what we would call an external locus of control rather than an internal locus of control, because we are oftentimes in situations where we are sort of at the mercy of our environment in a lot of ways, which can cause us to kind of take on this position where we're not really exercising the agency that maybe we could. So I think digging into that sort of things. I think providing receipts like we do here in the Manosphere could be incredibly helpful. In the therapeutic context, I would see providing receipts as psychoeducation that sort of informs but also challenges beliefs that a person may have with facts, data, and statistics. There are a lot of things that we've sort of absorbed as true or natural from this culture that actually aren't. And I think the Black Manosphere has done a great job of exposing some of those fallacies. And I think that's something that could be used in a therapeutic context just to help people get a more realistic worldview. I guess here in the space, we might call that red pill. EMDR is another tool that I think could be incredibly helpful. Schema therapy, nonviolent communication, grounding, mindful meditation, and mindfulness. All those are things that I think would easily lend themselves to this sort of a framework in ways that could be incredibly helpful. So I think there's a lot of promise for something like this. And I'm curious to hear feedback from people in the space, especially if there are any like mental health professionals that come across this video, or people who are maybe mental health advocates. Like, please weigh in and let me know what you think about this. And you know, kind of like Dr. Tiasan Johnson's 14-point Black male political agenda. This is really a living document. This is a living thing that we're sort of building as we go. And so your feedback is critical. This is therapy that is going to be for us, by us. And by all means, if you're, you know, somebody who's not a Black male, this isn't to exclude anybody, you know. So if there are things within this that you find to be helpful, and I think there are, I think that there's a lot of this thing that's being built, a lot of aspects of it that will be beneficial to anybody who's trying to carve out a more authentic human experience of the world. So while, you know, Black men, you know, in particular, and Black people are the focal point, that isn't to be exclusive. It's I think that society as a whole could benefit from us being healed and us, you know, finally being given a platform to work through our stuff. So You're not you're not barred from attending the party. You're just not VIP. And so hopefully there's no hurt feelings. Hopefully you get it. But, unfortunately, I think it has to be unapologetically about the healing of the people who seem to be the most neglected and oppressed at this present time. And I can't see how that's not Black boys and men. So we got to start there. We got to take care of our wounds first. We've been bleeding out, fighting everybody else's struggle and making sure everybody else was okay for far too long. And while I think it says a lot about our values and our willingness to be of help and support to other people, I think it's time for us to give some of that empathy and all that we give away to other people to ourselves. So it is what it is. So on that, I think this video is long enough and I've rambled enough. Hopefully, this makes sense and could be a starting place for more conversations to come where we can get this thing built and start hopefully moving towards a place of healing. With that, I'm Phil. This is Black Pill Therapy, and I'm out. I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.